Good morning and welcome to another 50 Acres Academy webinar. This morning we're going to be looking at Snapchat and asking the question, is it just for my kids, in brackets 14-year-old son, or can we use it ourselves as ordinary human beings? So I don't profess to be a 14-year-old teenager and as adept at Snapchat as the rest of you. In fact, I'm not even particularly active on it myself, but a lot of people have been asking us about Snapchat, so I thought I would respond to those requests for information and do a webinar on it. Just before I start, I'm actually at a horse event, the National Polo Cross Championships down at Albury. So if you hear some what sounds like racing commentary in the background, or perhaps distant horses neighing or people trotting by, that's the reason. There are 800 horses on the site where I'm at, and we're doing the media pro bono for the organisation. My family plays polocrosse, just for the record in case you hear some strange noises. So let's get started. Essentially, obviously, we're looking at Snapchat today, and we're wanting to try and understand what it is. I've sort of made the assumptions that people don't know what it is, and so I'm really sort of starting from that basic level and then going into it a little bit more deeply in terms of the sort of options and how you can get to understand it, etc., etc. So don't hesitate asking any questions, putting a question up in the question box at any stage. If you just pop something up, I'll respond to those as we go, and I will do my best to answer them. As I said, I'm not as adept at Snapchat as I am on perhaps some of the other social platforms that are around, but I will endeavour to ask a question. If I don't know the answer, we'll come back to you about what the answer might be. So let's kick off. I'm just trying to make this work. Sorry, I'm sitting in a small, what is ostensibly a caravan, effectively. So my apologies. Now, sorry, I'm just trying to get the screen to move. Here we go. Okay. Sorry, it's just a little bit more rustic right now. So what we're looking at today is Snapchat. What we're going to cover is this: what it is, what are the demographics for it, and how we can use it as not-for-profits and corporates. And I'm just sort of assuming that probably the bulk of you are not-for-profits, but this is equally applicable for corporates and SMEs as well. There's a great deal of stuff we can do on Snapchat. So what is Snapchat? Oh, I see there's this funny little yellow ghost icon. It had its origins from two guys from Stanford University. And they created it not too long ago. And, when they first started it, just like anything else, it was sort of in their living room. They've had a couple of legal stoushes amongst the team to sort of work out who owns it and who doesn't own it. Now it's worth a lot of money, as a lot of these things are. So let's understand a little bit about what it is. So as Snapchat themselves explain, this is what they say about what they are. Our default is delete. Conversations are ephemeral unless someone chooses to save or screenshot them. And if they do, we do our best to make the sender aware. Just like a face-to-face conversation, content stays impermanent. That's their key catchphrase, really. That's the word that they use a lot, impermanent, unless someone goes out of their way to record it. So it's really fundamentally a very different platform because it is sort of ephemeral and impermanent. But it is increasingly becoming one that we need to get into and get involved in. And let's have a think about how we might do that. Sorry that I'm scrolling up like this. I just can't seem to make this work in the traditional way I normally do. So what is Snapchat? Well, it's used for creating multimedia messages, referred to as snaps. Snaps consist of a photo or a short video, and they can be edited to include filters or effects, text captions and drawings. You might have seen ones where people stick out their tongue and this huge long sort of lizard-like tongue goes out, or you can sort of make your face do weird things. All sorts of options exist to make you look weird or interesting, I suppose. So you can write things on the cat on you can draw on a photo. You can put a caption on a photo. There's all sorts of filters and all sorts of other effects that you can use. Snaps can be directed to a semi-public story or sent privately to specific friends. So you can just send a snap to one person or to everyone. The message can be viewed for a user-specified length of time, so you can nominate whether that's going to be 1 to 10 seconds before it disappears and becomes inaccessible. Friends can be added via usernames and phone contacts, or by using customizable snap codes. We'll get that later, or through the add nearby function, and we'll get to that later in terms of your putting on location stuff and enabling all those things to make it work a bit more effectively. The thing about Snapchat, and for those of you who aren't on it or don't know much about it, is that it is actually difficult. We'll talk about this a bit more, but it is very difficult to find out any accurate metrics about, how many friends someone's got. You don't know. You can go on Instagram and you can see that Lady Gaga's got X million people and that she's getting X amount of likes or X amount of comments to a particular photo. Or you can see the sorts of stuff that some of the other organisations that you're following or interested in, the sort of reactions they're getting. You can't do that on Snapchat. It's much more of a private interface. But that doesn't mean that it's not useful for you, and it is certainly useful for you. So we'll think about that. It is one of those things, I suppose, that you've really got to develop and trust in, and you've got to develop your own audience and have faith in that audience that it's engaging with you. You don't really know about others. You've only really got a sort of a sense of what people are doing from what they're telling you, or from what Snapchat perhaps or some of the other social media analytics companies are telling us about their stats. So let's think about the demographics. There's supposed to be a cool guy on Snapchat. Who's on it? Now, we might just think it's all 14-year-old teenagers, and you'd be right to some extent. I mean, Snapchat, let's just think about who's using it. Some of these statistics are from last year. There is a few bits and pieces you can get from this year. In 2015, Snapchat grew its 18 to 24-year-old base by 56%, while its 25 to 34-year-old users increased 103%. And most notably, its over 35-year-old users base grew by 84%. That's people like me. That's Comscore, which is one of the big analytics firms. According to Snapchat, 12% of its almost 50 million daily users in the US, a lot of these stats out of the US, and so, I'm just sort of guessing that generally speaking, these sort of stats are probably reflected here, are between 35 and 54. So adding older users could be the key to growing, a particular advertising business if you're a company or if you're a not-for-profit. As a social media platform, Snapchat is most identified with millennials, but it's now increasingly adding users older than 25, as those stats indicate. So, what are these statistics? Let's have a look at them. In 2016, Snapchat hit the 7 billion daily video views. Snapchat Stories content is viewed by 500 million, or is viewed 500 million times per day. These are big stats, obviously, and they're growing. The company has a valuation of between 10 and 20 billion, depending on what valuation and what company you're listening to. It now allows advertising, but its rates are out of the reach of most not-for-profits and SMEs. This will probably change. A bit like when Twitter advertising first came online, they were prohibitive. I can remember looking at them myself, and the ads were 3 or 4, 5,000. Now we can advertise for a few dollars. So I think that will change. We'll get to advertising in a little bit. So important stuff to know in terms of statistics and demographics for your marketing choices. Snapchat's almost outstripping Facebook now for video views. I think it's only just behind it by about sort of 10%. Although Facebook's got more users than Snapchat, the Snapchat users are more active. Research indicates that vertical videos keeps audiences for longer. So if you're familiar with the format, you know that you can look at a video horizontally or vertically, landscape or portrait. A lot of the time when you're watching a video on Facebook, you can enlarge it so that you can make it a horizontal video or a landscape video, particularly if it's going to YouTube. In Snapchat, it doesn't allow you to do that. It only allows you to look at the video in a portrait way. The evidence indicates that vertical videos keeps audiences for longer, 9 times, I think, longer in terms of the length of video that they are watching per video, the length of time they are engaged with a particular video. And there's more people that are watching videos to the end or to the end of that video than they are when they're watching them in landscape. Obviously, that's a good stat. And the reason why people are saying that people are doing that is because people are used to looking at the phone vertically. They look at email vertically. They look at text messages vertically. People are increasingly, wanting to look at things without moving their screen up and down, rotating the screen. And so people are coping with that. Bigger screens is helping with that as well. So that's an interesting fact. The audiences are engaged. The Snapchat audiences are very, very engaged. 65% of the Snapchat audiences upload photos daily. That's huge. I think it's only something like 36% for Facebook. So it's significantly different. With millennials, Snapchat is rapidly gaining on Instagram for them. So, people are on Instagram, but they're, in terms of their activity levels, they're actually becoming more activated on Snapchat than they are with Instagram. And again, this is an American statistic, but it's interesting. 60% of America's 18 to 34-year-olds smartphone users visit Snapchat every day. That's pretty huge. And there's a heck of a lot of kids on using smartphones in the US. So you can imagine that stat's probably replicated here, probably similarly, I would think. Just their stats aren't available that I've been able to find. So that's pretty massive. So certainly if you're wanting to reach 18 to 34-year-olds, it's one of the places to be. So how do we actually use it? That's the question. It's all well and good. It's cool to be able to go on there and jump on there and make your tongue like a lizard. But what's the relevance to us? What's the relevance to us when we're trying to work professionally for an organisation or for a company or for your own business? How do we make it work for us? So let me give you my take on it. I think it's probably about, it's about a lot of things. I can remember my elderly father some years ago, probably 10 years ago now, asking me when we first started using, maybe 15 years ago even, first started using email for business. He asked me, he said, do you use email for business? Do people use it? And I think another question he asked me was, now that they've made 4 iPhones, that they probably made enough. They don't need to make any more. I mean, people who are standing at the outside of any social media platform do tend to judge and do tend to think what they're doing is okay, and they don't need to do anything else. And that's not to say that you have to throw resources at Snapchat or you have to jump on it and just spend all your day on it. But it's about not judging what's happening out there and going, well, maybe this is something we do need to get on and deal with and have it set up so that we're ready. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that. So it doesn't mean that your not-for-profit or company needs to become regularly active, I think, on Snapchat, but you should be aware of its increasing popularity and lay a foundation in case you decide to prioritize Snapchat in the future. So if it's ready, then you're ready. Your organization or you as an individual or your company is ready to get going when you need to be. Snapchat is making an effort to increase its viability as a marketing and digital payment processing tool for brands and for not-for-profits. You can actually enter in the settings, you can enter in your credit card details, and if you've got other friends who've got the same settings, you can privately send them money, a bit like PayPal. So there's a sort of a PayPal within Snapchat that's set up, which is quite extraordinary. So for people out there who are on Snapchat and the increasing value of it, if they're engaged with your not-for-profit, then they can send you money if you need it, or you can even sell things on Snapchat as well. So you need to have a look at that as a source of potential revenue. So, if you've got the time and the resources, I would suggest you have a look at it. So I think early adoption is a really good thing to do. It's a good bet right now. The adoption phase of a social media platform is when the new communities grow the fastest. We know that. It's been around since 2011. It's now 2016, so it's been around 5 years. And now we're all, it's taken a few years before people have gone, probably less than a few years. There's been people talking about it for a while, but people now want to make it work. The big world wants to make it work. The adults want to come and play, and that's what we're thinking about now. How do we come and play in Snapchat? So what tactics can I use on Snapchat? I think it's really important to have a think about that if you are going to jump on there. So one of the things you do need to do is you need to be active. One of the descriptions that I got in, sort of a cool for school take on how to use Snapchat was don't be lame. I know that's a very US term, but you can't be lame. You can't be too serious. You got to be interesting, and it's ephemeral. It's moving. It's not about being, don't get on there and sort of necessarily. I mean, yes, sometimes if you're not for profit, there's a sob story involved, and I mean that advisedly. There's a serious issues to be communicated, but how can you communicate it in the way that's relevant for the people on Snapchat? And as I often say to people about when you're communicating with people in different platforms, you've got to be where your tribe is. So obviously you've got to decide that the people on Snapchat are the part of the tribe that you want to talk to. But how is it? What's the platform appropriate way of communicating with them? It's certainly not getting on there and giving them 10 dot points for an action plan or a link to a PDF document. I mean, it's not a serious platform. It can be an activation platform, most certainly. It can be a platform that informs and that grows awareness. But it's the sort of platform that probably is used best when you deploy people like ambassadors, people like ordinary people who are involved with your group or with your staff, or your team or your volunteers, or your some celebrities who might be involved. It's that sort of ephemera. It's that stuff that people will want to get in and get. We'll get to this in a second, but the sort of the sort of secret stuff, because this is the sort of sense that you've got of Snapchat, that it is a sort of secret squirrel's place. It's the stuff that you go and get, stuff that's sort of private, because it's when you get it, you can't go back and get it again. You can't go back in there and see it again. So you're seeing it, and then you don't get to see it. So, it's that secret squirrel stuff that you've got to get people sort of excited about. So how do you share those stories? So I think they are certainly the first point that I make here is that they are the most marketed to generation ever, and they have very high expectations from brands. They have a lot of quality stuff pumped out at them, but if you look at Snapchat, it's actually not that beautiful a platform. If you look at it, the effects are pretty sort of tacky. The caption text is pretty basic. It's a pretty basic platform, but yet there are really successful brands and organizations that are using it. So, go figure. But they do have high expectations. So it's about being creative, I suppose, rather than being lame. So it's not just about you getting on there and saying, hi, I'm really amazing and this is a really serious story and I'm going to be here to tell you about the serious story. You've got to think about how you're going to make that come alive. And it might be a bit of music, it might be, short bursts. We'll talk about length and stuff in a second. But it's thinking about how you're going to do it creatively. I think creatively is very important. You do need to understand Snapchat. It shuns traditional marketing, and it has a complex set of communication tools and possibilities. So, it's very traditional. It's not a traditional marketing platform, and it is complicated. If you look on the settings and all the sort of possibilities that are there for the settings and the effects, we'll talk about some of the other stuff in a second in terms of emojis, but there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of possibilities that you can use and deploy. So you need to understand it. It's not just like Twitter, 140 characters, pretty easy. Put a couple of links in. You need to know a couple of bits about, if you do at or put a dot at the beginning or whatever. It's not that simple. It's a bit more complicated. So you need to get in there and have a bit of a look around about all the different stuff that's in there before you start using it. And obviously that will grow over time, but get a bit of a handle on that. I think it's a good thing. You need to set it up. So you need to claim your username. That's the first thing. So if you haven't done that, like a lot of other assets, you need to set it up. So, claim your username, go in there, set it up so that make sure that someone else is not going to claim it, and then set up your filters. So at least it's sitting there. It's a placeholder. And, you've got it there ready to go and activate when you want to activate it, which is a good thing, which is really important. So what's some other stuff we need to think about? We need to understand, I just mentioned the Snapchat emoji hierarchy. It's phenomenal. There is not just your normal, hearts or, kisses or, thumbs up or whatever else, emojis. There is a stack of them, and they mean stuff. And you've got ratings and, Snapchat gives people, if you're a celebrity, you get, you get another type of emoji. It's very complicated. So, if you're going to go on there and you're going to start communicating with people and they're going to start telling you stuff, you need to know what they're telling you. So you need to sort of understand it. So learn the basics via the Snapchat support page, and the link is there. Probably using video to share, as I said before, some of the behind the scenes look at your brand or your organization, and think about the sort of stuff that you've got that's happening all the time behind the scenes of your company or your not-for-profit. Fun stuff in the office, if you've got some ambassadors or celebrities popping in, going out to do, working with the people that you work with, whatever it is you're doing, just start using it. Have a look at some of the other not-for-profits are doing this stuff. There's a lot of them in the US, so if you can't find any in Australia, have a look at the US ones, and just have a look at some of they're doing some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, and try and start doing some of it. Keep it super casual. Now, in the US, they call it Keep It Disney, which I think is quite cool, really. And it is about keeping it light. And I don't mean that it's keeping it silly, or that it's keeping it, it's all about joking, because sometimes, if you're a not-for-profit, you can't communicate serious stuff all the time in jokes. It's inappropriate. But it's about keeping it light. And the next point ties in with that, keeping it short, because if you're communicating to people in lengthy video or lengthy sentences, certainly this younger audience don't really respond to that particularly well. Finding people can be really tough, so you need to advertise your snap code, which we'll get to that in a second, what a snap code is. But I'll show you one now. That's a snap code, and we'll come back to that, what that is in a second. Some of you may know about snap codes, but essentially you create a snap code. It's one of those things that people can tap on, and they go straight to your Snapchat page, and you can use it and deploy it in other ways, and I'll come to that in a second. So, if you try to just search for, Joe Scard or 50 Acres, it's not necessarily as easy as you do as you can find them on Twitter or Facebook. So, if you can help people to locate you, then that's a good thing. Snap codes is one way of doing that. Geo searching is another way of doing that. Location-based searching is another good way of doing it as well. Promotions are really hard. So, we can, like I said before, Twitter, will now let you advertise for as little as a few dollars. If you want to advertise on Snapchat right now, the reports I've been reading is it's anything between 100,000 upwards of 750,000 US a day for big brands and not-for-profits. Now, not-for-profits can't afford that. That's throwing good money after bad. That's silly. But if you're a big brand and you're wanting to reach, 50 million millennials, I like that word, millennials, then it's a good place to be, because you're growing awareness. You might sell a particular outfit or whatever it is you're trying to sell. You might have a sort of cool person, or whoever it is, some sort of influencer, some sort of celebrity endorse something, and so everyone wants to go and buy it, and they sell 500,000 of them in 5 minutes and pays for itself. So you need to create your own community vibe and your own activity and your own promotion at this stage. I think that will change. That will come down. It'll become more accessible. But for the moment, it isn't accessible. And I think give it a couple of years, maybe even less, we'll see Snapchat promotions being more available. I think at the moment they're trying to make it a sort of an us and them sort of environment. People are coming there to see that sort of edgy, high-level stuff. And so, who knows how long it'll take to change. But so in some respects, you need to actually create your own promotion with your own community. Now, that's hard work, but you can do it. And you can do it in all sorts of ways. You can do it by, sending links, asking them to do hashtags, in a similar way than you do some of the sort of activities that you would do on Facebook and Twitter in terms of activities. But you're doing them on Snapchat. You just can't promote them. You can't sort of force your way into someone's feed like you can on those other ones if you're paying to do it. So, I suppose a lot of people say to themselves, should you do it? Should you go on a Facebook? Should you go on a Snapchat? The things that I would say is ask yourself these questions. Are your people there? Is it your tribe that are there? Who is it that you're wanting to communicate to? are they on Snapchat? If you are in any way wanting to, interface with, teenagers, adolescents, 20-year-olds up to 30-year-olds, then I would think using this platform is one of the things that you should be thinking about doing. Do your supporters, donors, and volunteers use Snapchat? Well, they probably do. They may not necessarily do it in quite the organised way that you want them to, but they certainly do. What percentage of your audience are millennials, as I just said? Try and work that out. You can probably work that out from your database if you're a not-for-profit. If you're a company, you can probably understand your client base or your sales base and understand whether that is part of it. And if it is, then there's probably a place that you need to be. How can you add value? What will you share that's useful to those people? You can't. It's not just about being there and sticking out a lizard tongue from, the MD's mouth when they look silly. It's more than that. You've got to tell them something. You've got to be, getting them to be aware of what you do, what you mean, what you say, what you sell, whatever it is. You've got to be doing something that brings them something. Otherwise, you'll just be swiped. As anyone who's been on Snapchat knows, they'll just swipe you. So you've got to do something that's going to stop them and go, hey, that's interesting, whatever that is. What will you share that's entertaining? And that gets back to the nature of the beast, the nature of the culture of Snapchat, if you like, the sort of casual, ephemeral, impermanence, as Snapchat calls it, nature of the platform itself. What can you do that will entertain someone? And again, as I say, you can't always do that for every single thing, but you can, give it a go and, show people enjoying what they're doing with you, whatever it is. If it's working in your company, if it's doing something for your organization, if it's, bringing joy to someone, how are people doing that? What are you doing? If you're having some fun, show it. But obviously make a point of telling people what it is and allowing them to reach you in another way. So, giving them a link to your website, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, so that they can communicate with you in another way that isn't so ephemeral, that isn't so impermanent. They can reach you, they can reach out to you, they can connect with you, they can get on your database, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's always important. So I think one of the things before we finish and wind up here is obviously understanding snap codes. And if anyone's got any questions, please jump in and ask them shortly, because we don't have too many. Don't have a lot more to go. As I mentioned to you before, there are snap codes that you can use. This is a snap code, so it's an intrinsic code, if you like, that is intrinsic to you. And no one else, and it's a computer-generated code. Now, to grow your Snapchat following, you need to create a custom snap code. That way, the supporters can easily add your not-for-profit or company and brand as a friend by taking a screenshot of your snap code and then tapping Add Friends, Add by Snap Code. You can also use that snap code as an avatar on your other social media platforms, so people know you are on it. So it's quite common. You don't have to do it permanently. So I would suggest a week on, a week off. So use the avatar, on Twitter or on Facebook or even on Google Plus or your email or whatever it is. Just so people begin to know that you're on Snapchat. People will see the bright yellow, the neon yellow, and or whatever it's called, the canary yellow, and they'll go, okay, you're on Snapchat, great. And that will probably help grow it in itself. So I think that's really a thing to do. The other thing to get familiar with is the Snapchat brand area. Now that's if you've spent any time on Snapchat, you go on there, you see a whole lot of suggested brands at the front page. Some of those are Australian, some of those are US, and that's the advertising. That's where they're getting the big bucks. That's where they're getting the 750,000 US a day. It might be interesting for you to go on there and see what they do and how they're using it. Obviously, it's out of your reach at the moment, but you'll certainly get some ideas from some of those brands and some of those larger organisations about how they are using and deploying the resources of Snapchat. So I think that's a really good place to start. So essentially, just in some, not-for-profits and corporates, they are using it for events. They are using it for storytelling and for mobile office and for volunteer engagement, engaging potential new staff and other networks. You need to get to understand it. You need to learn it. It's a bit like it's a bit like learning how to do Keynote or PowerPoint or InDesign. It's a new platform. There's some new skills. It's not that hard, but you just need to understand the variety of things that you can do with it to do it properly. So jump on, take your username, set it up as a placeholder if nothing else. Have a look around, familiarize yourself with the emojis, get to know what you can do. But I think to get inspired, have a look at some other people that are using it really well. And it'll give you some ideas. And even if you start small, it's a great place to be. Rather than just going, maybe not, we'll come back to it. Grab the username. That can't hurt. It can never hurt just to grab it, and so that you've got it. So that's another snap code. I think that's for Target in the US actually. So thanks so much for coming today and joining in this webinar. It's been great to have you. I'm just guessing no one's got any questions because no one's popped anything up, which is fantastic. If anyone has any questions, then do let us know later. If there's something that jumps up at you, just let us know. Our next 50 Acres Academy webinar will probably take place during the election, I'm guessing. So I'm going to look at election advertising of the parties and the polling, just really giving you a bit of a recap on where it's going, a bit of an assessment of where things are up to, a bit of a snapshot of the election itself, and that's going to be on 11 a.m. Tuesday, May 17th. There'll be enough time to have a second one during the election because it's so long. So I'm not quite sure what we'll do in June, but we'll think about that. But thanks so much for joining today. I hope that's been helpful. It was rather a sort of introductory look at Snapchat, but I think that for a lot of us, it is something that people are just putting their big toe in the water, and it is something that we do need to get more familiar with. So best of luck with it. And don't hesitate asking any questions if you like later. We'll also be sending out the slides and the recording of this webinar, and the slides will be available on our YouTube channel 50 Acres TV. If you just search 50 Acres TV, you can go back and ask and have a look at it. Someone's just asked, someone said, how do you measure engagement on Snapchat, other analytics? That's a good question. I haven't been able to answer that simply. I think it's really measuring your own analytics. I haven't seen an analytics firm that provides a platform you can go on and measure Twitter and Facebook, and you can plug in stuff and measure it. I would be thinking that there's probably some platforms that do plug in and you can measure your own analytics by plugging it into a platform. I don't know which one that is, but I'm sure there is. So if you just search up, Snapchat and metrics, I'm sure you can probably find someone that does it. If I come across one, I will let people know. Thanks so much again. Good to talk to you all, and have a lovely day. And I look forward to talking with you on another webinar. Thanks so much.